What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of Short Shifts, fantasy hockey podcast brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. We are your bi-weekly short episode in between the long Keeping Karlsson Sundays. So talking about the mega show, we got a special guest today. We got the one and only Brian Kom. How's it going today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Shams. I'm pleased to be here. That sounds a little tepid. I'm really pumped to be here for a Tuesday short shift. I have I don't make regular short shifts appearances. I like to keep them rare, so it's always exciting when I do show up. I hope that's the effect rather than I thought they finally stopped having him on the midweeks. Once is enough. But I'm thanks, Shams, for having me. I'm in the heat of my second round consolation bracket matchup. Early returns are decent. I have some thoughts. Anyway, I'm really excited to talk about everybody's teams and all the players, and not just my own.
I am in the same boat as you. I had double bye week. I'm in 2 leagues, and I had one consolation bye. Sadly, it's a couple. And then in my home league, I was in a bye for the championship. So last week, I was just kind of sitting on my hands thinking about booze, and now I'm actually checking every goal to see if I'm involved.
I actually didn't. I didn't even clarify. Like I'm in the like when I'm talking about the playoffs. If I don't mention like what league I'm talking, it's cupful, right? Like it's obviously it's tier 4 Jokerit. That's like the default. It's like saying I breathe instead of I breathe air. I'm in the consolation bracket, not the cupful. It's just obvious. I don't need to clarify. Okay, but now that that's clear, yeah, I'm gonna write like I call this consolation bracket. By the way, it's vengeance. And then someone pointed out that why am I taking vengeance against all the other teams that didn't make the championship bracket? And it's because these teams, some of them beat me. And they didn't do anything with that win. We all landed up in the same place. That's the best I can do, though.
Oh no, I have that that petty streak in me. I was like, even though I was preparing for next week, I was looking at my weekly total, be like, oh, I would have beat this team, that team, this team. It's that all those things play in the mind. So with that in mind, let's get forward to a person that's probably not been in many people's minds because. Forget of how long he's been gone, but Zegras is actually confirmed to be playing today. So we don't have the full line, so we don't know about power plays and whatnot. But the weird thing is they're calling it the third line, but I guess it is when you look at his wingers. He's with Lundstrom and Leason. And an interesting stat before I throw it to you is that I saw this on Twitter and I can't believe it, is that tonight is the only going to be the third time that the Ducks have Zegras, Karlsson, Terry, Killorn, and McTavish, Strome, and Vetrano. Basically, the people you could probably name on that team, other than maybe some of the defensemen. This is the third time all season, assuming nothing happens between now and the game, that all of them are actually going to be playing. So part of me is kind of thinking, we all know where they are in the standings. Would they be actually somewhat interesting if they're fully healthy?
Yeah, it could be time. I mean, it's really hard to say. We haven't had a whole lot of time to take stock. And even Zegras and Terry, who are the ones we'd expect, were missing each other in the lineup early on. And for the rare games that they were together, they weren't faring very well. So I'm really curious to see how Trevor Zegras does in, I guess this fully healthy Ducks lineup that we'll see for 10 games, which Shams, I'm that fact you just mentioned interests me. That they actually have, I'm looking at the Ducks top 6 that they rolled last game. And it was Killorn, Karlsson, Terry, Vetrano, McTavish, Strome. And that's not a half bad group, especially when you replace one of those guys with Zegras. Say you cycle out Strome and add in Zegras. And that's a pretty respectable bunch. And I want to see what they can do. For anyone who is streaming Brett Leason, it looks like he's going to be the one he gets to play with Zegras at even strength. He's going to lose his spot on the top power play. Derek Lee reporting that Zegras could be on the right flank, and that means Leo Carlsson shifts to net front, which we'll see how any of that plays out. And of course, I also wonder if this makes one of the Ducks defensemen more valuable than the other. You've got Fowler and Mintyukov, who have been sort of each QBing units that are kind of indistinguishable from one another. So I guess to me, like if Leason is moved off the top unit, then you've got Terry, Zegras, McTavish, Leo Carlson, and my guess. I mean, why guess? Like the game's going to start in like 90 or 83 minutes or something from now. So I guess we'll wait and see. But whoever that is, you might have some interest in on what could be an energized Ducks power play. I mean, the caveat here being that like Zegras, everyone in Anaheim has had a bad season. That's how I started this talking about it. But hey, maybe we give them the benefit of the doubt and say they've just been hurting the whole time. And this could be their chance. Shams, how excited? Like I have Zegras coming back in 2 lineups. I barely held on to him when my IR was full. I did. How are you feeling about his potential to produce now that he's healthy?
Well, the part that kind of I'm curious about is the fact that he is on that, like he's the one singled out, not with any of the named players that I was just talking about before finally playing together. So it'll be interesting to see if this is just going to be one of those situations where you see this a lot. Players out for a while. Let's give him a soft start. Like he is playing, he's going to be on the ice, but maybe he won't see much today, and then the rest of the week he'll get play. And the interesting thing to keep in mind is that they are one of the few 4-game teams this week, and one of the 2 that is playing on Sunday. So even if he doesn't do much, or you don't have a place to fit in a random Duck, it might be worth just kind of keeping an eye on who gets where, and then that might be your Sunday savior. If it's really right now, if you look at Vancouver, probably literally anyone of worth is plucked off there because they had another off-night game already.
Yeah, exactly. And mind you also, as Elon and I were talking with the schedule on Sunday, your Sunday savior might be someone you add on like Wednesday or Thursday because there's no other moves to really make with such a packed schedule. So just keep in mind, if you're looking at a Duck and you like the early returns, you might need to jump. Here's an interesting Ducks fact, Shams. Their power play is garbage. I don't know if that's interesting or not, but they're converting less than 18%. League average is 21%. And the Ducks have just 38 power play goals this season. So like 1 power play goal every other game, roughly. And they're just 2 for their last 32 opportunities. So that would be great if they could just start doing stuff there.
That'll be interesting to see with everyone healthy, and then you got Mintyukov that's learning, and then maybe we're talking about 2 defensemen. Maybe Zellweger, the third, might be. He has some offensive prowess, to my understanding. So this could be one of those situations where maybe the dial doesn't get moved too much at the end of the season, but maybe we get dragged back in on next season, and then 3 weeks we're going to be complaining, why did I draft the Ducks again? But we'll see how it goes. But at the very least, I wouldn't be surprised if people are just going to be adding everyone because of just that Sunday game. So either way, we're going to be in it probably for most likely in this week. Talking about healthy, we got some more injury news, and this one is coming out of Toronto, and it's kind of a weird thing. It's just kind of the news coming out with Samsonov. He's like, he's fine, he's not fine. So basically, the quote today, he's out today. I believe, I think Martin Jones is backing up, so he's not even in the game. His coach said today is a chance for him to work his way back to the mix. At this point, based on how things went today, we're expecting him to be back at practice tomorrow and take it from there. So this is going to be that kind of situation. Luckily, I believe he does have the out designation in Yahoo, so it's kind of a wait and see. But this might be a situation where I believe the score is 3-3 right now. So it's not like Woll is having that magical game that it's still confident. So we'll have to wait and see. But maybe he might just get the next game by default and every goalie start as well. And then secondly, this is kind of was under the radar and kind of have to see how much we're interested anyway, because Morgan Rielly hasn't been doing too much, but he is out today with an upper body injury. And one little thing to take note here is that it was a game time decision. So, weirder news comes out where players are close to coming out and then you hear, they shredded their knee, but they wanted to play anyway. So I'm not thinking it's that bad, but we'll have to see if more information comes out later today. But right now we have kind of two kind of in the air injuries right now, and they seem to be at least faring well enough against New Jersey to be in it tied right now in the second period. So is there anything to take from that, or is it more of just a wait and see until we get more information?
I guess wait and see. I mean, it's hard to really pronounce on this, but halfway through the game, the Leafs have only allowed, well, I guess 14 shots by now on net, which pay out like they've taken twice as much. So I was going to say the defense might not be hurting that much without, but maybe they're not. Like that's about average, right? If they're on pace to give up, 28, 30, 32 shots, that's NBD. If Joseph Woll had stopped more of the those more than 11 of those 14 shots, they'd be looking better. My head's spinning a little bit right now because I had like 7. I have Allen and Woll, and I had 7 cupful points between them. And since then, both their totals have dropped, and I have 1.8 points between Allen and Woll. So just like if one of them could just stop the puck, that would be great. I also wonder, Shams, like with Joseph Woll, like he really has been struggling. Little pet peeve. Yahoo had this long-standing note, like as the latest news on Joseph Woll, and it said scuffling since return from injury. That bothered me. I think that was the wrong word. What does it even mean? Like he was struggling. Scuffling doesn't. Anyway, he continues to scuffle or struggle, however you want to say it. Like Woll has had that one good game against Carolina where he lost, but he stopped 41 of 43 on Saturday. Was it Sunday? Might have been Sunday. But really, outside of that, he's had more bad than good starts since he's returned. So I honestly wonder, like I have Joseph Woll. He's probably not, I assume he's not playing the next game, even if Samsonov isn't healthy. I assume Martin Jones, I don't know, actually, maybe they'd at least just keep pushing Woll. It's tough. Like I'm not feeling great about it. And I figure he'll get just one more game this week, one way or another. And for me, that's a reason to potentially drop him after this game against New Jersey, where he's not doing well.
Yeah, it's going to really depend on just how many moves you got available to use. Say if you had to buy and you're already loaded up and you're sitting on a couple, maybe you might do some things. Or if you're in a situation where goalie starts are more dependable than you need them, like in a categories league, and you want to get ahead. Because I picked Samsonov up last week in my home league, thinking, okay, I'll get some starts out of him. I actually have him and Allen with Soros, basically with it's going to be my idea. But with him kind of sitting on out with the injury, I'm kind of thinking I might not even get all the games, especially with the way Allen's playing. They might want to give Kakkinen a game. So it's really going to be an interesting idea of just kind of where you were with your moves and your need for goalie starts, and also with your injury situation, you might be fine just letting Samsonov and or Woll go for someone a little bit more dependable. But if you have the flexibility, obviously just keep them on your IR.
Yeah, it doesn't look like either guy is ready to run the table the rest of the year. So it seems to me like a situation where volume is going to be hard and starts are going to be hard to predict, which is really challenging at this time of year.
Moving on to some better news is that while we don't have confirmation that they're going to be playing, we actually have some news about Joel Eriksson and Jonas Brodin. They both practiced today, and it says possible returns for them on Thursday. They don't have, I believe they only played twice this week, but the juicy thing is that their game on Thursday is against the Sharks. So this is just going to be one of those simple things of kind of keep in line with your IRs and your starts that both of them might be back, and especially a kind of a thing to keep in mind, even outside of Sharks game, which probably is going to be fine defensively, is that whoever's the goalie is going to be starting going forward, both of these players are known to be big penalty kill minutes and just defensive responsible players that even with them back, it just helps whoever the goalie is as well. Is anything else to throw into that?
Well, I think I'll just I'll mention to look out if you've been rostering Matt Zuccarello or Marco Rossi, who were playing with Kaprizov in the last game, because one of them could be bumped by, like, just be ready for a line shakeup. Actually, I don't know if everyone's noticed, but in the last game, Ryan Hartman was playing with Matt Boldy. Their line scored twice. And the Kaprizov line scored twice and gave up one. That was against St. Louis on Saturday. So if these lines are kind of working, I don't know if that changes. And it just means, like, Hartman with Boldy, still not a bad option, right? And actually Zuccarello with Kaprizov, last game he got an assist, but on the whole, Zuccarello has not been doing a whole lot. He's got 3 points in his last 8 games, barely rosterable. Marco Rossi had a huge game, though, in his most recent, and I'm curious to see what happens next. He had season-high shots with 7, season-high time on ice with 20, almost 21 minutes, picked up 2 goals. That's the most important part of all this, but that ties the season high for Rossi. It's fun to say season-high things first. So we'll see where this leaves Rossi. Like, he was also on the top power play, along with Zuccarello and Boldy and Kaprizov, so I wonder if he might get bumped off that top unit. So that's something to look out for. And all of this to also say, Minnesota plays twice this week. So I almost like anyone with Brodin would probably rather he miss the next game. And I'll take 2 games of Ek over 3 games of a streamer. So that's cool. And then the last wild shout out I'll give, with the caveat that also it's 2 games, is Declan Chisholm has been on the top power play for the last couple games. Nothing to show for it except 10 penalty minutes and 12 penalty minutes. Sorry, 10 of them came in one game, 2 shots total, 4 blocks, 2 hits. Those are totals from both games that he's been on the top power play. It looks like he's at least getting some looks here. 24 years old. He just turned 24. Do you know anything else, Shams, about Declan Chisholm?
I can't say too much, but I always thought it will be interesting to see how they do their power plays, because right now, to my understanding, they just practiced. We didn't have any line information, because especially with the power play, and say you're talking about Boldy with, I believe it was Hartman. If I remember correctly, forget who the third was, but when Eriksson Ek was in his Johansson, yeah, with his when Eriksson Ek was in his heyday, getting all the points, it was him and Boldy together. So honestly, I think right now it's just kind of wait and see. It's just going to be hard of working off of the current data or what you had from the past. It's basically just going to be probably, I'm not sure if they're going to be skating tomorrow, especially without a game until Thursday, but just keep an eye out for game day lines, and then that will help you kind of decide the value of each person. And we'll see if he doesn't get on already blanking out on the person's name, because I don't know much about him, but if he gets maybe not first power play anymore, maybe he's on the second, and then something could still happen with him in your deep leagues.
Yeah, Declan Chisholm just is the name. So he came from the Jets organization. Minnesota claimed him in late January, and he'd been okay. He had 5 points in 6 games with Manitoba of the AHL before, I guess, being called up and then being claimed off waivers. In the prior season, 43 points in 59 games. So I actually wonder if this is an offensive defenseman in waiting, like maybe a possible power play quarterback. And I guess Minnesota's interested in seeing that too. So I guess dynasty managers, you probably already know, but in case you don't, there he is.
Oh yeah, and especially with the way the Wild are with their cap, they're probably interested in anyone that they could have at a cheaper rate. So not sure how long the contract is, or probably won't be asking for too much in free agency if he goes there. That maybe it'll be something to be sticking around for a little bit longer.
Yeah, league minimum till the end of the season, or roughly league minimum. I'm not sure exactly what the minimum is, but it's down. It's low. All right, Shams, who's next?
So going on to, now this is a mix of people coming back, but not fully, is that a couple of injury updates from the Panthers, is that we got Barkov and Forsling back. However, Ekblad is not coming back. He's supposedly close. And the interesting thing is what they said is kind of been in line with what has been said at the start of the injury, is that they're taking it really slow. And he said, the coach said he wants at least 2 heavy practices first. So it'll be kind of one of those things where you just got to keep it wide. They did practice today. I don't know if he had the no contact jersey on, so maybe he's already one down, but it seems close enough, and it's going to be something where they'll probably announce it if it's that specific. But with the forwards, yeah.
I was just going to say, Shams, like if a fantasy irrelevant Aaron Ekblad gets injured and then may or may not return, does anyone actually notice? I don't know.
I guess, well, it's one of those dances is that even if he's not relevant, the way I look at it is that he sucks up the minutes from a, say, Forsling. My interest level in Forsling is kind of probably dependent on how much Ekblad is there. So I am with you with that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's that, maybe following the name more than the stat line, but he does kind of have ripple effects. And talking about names and stat lines, the interesting thing is that where you saw Barkov back and you're like, oh, okay, we're just going to go back to our normal lines, but it's not that. It's that Barkov is centering Tarasenko. Yep. When we told you he's fine to drop, he comes back to the top line, and he's also with Evan Rodriguez as the top line, which leaves, I believe this is still intact from previous games, Bennett with Kachuk and Verhaeghe, and now Reinhart is on the third line. Obviously, with his infinity goals, he's fine to stay in your roster, and he's going to be getting everything on the power play, but probably not too much to worry about this week, because probably with maybe your start sits, you haven't moved on from Tarasenko. Maybe you're a little bit interested in maybe starting him or something, but something to keep in mind if this sticks, you might be Tarasenko stock up potentially for championship week.
Yeah, still top line, I'll call this both. Florida has two top lines, so Tarasenko's now on one of them and on the second power play, so you can consider that. And Tarasenko's still the guy is he hasn't taken more than 2 shots in a game since joining Florida, and he's taken 2 shots in a game as often as or even less often actually, than he's taken 1 or 0 shots in a game. 12 to 14 minutes of ice lately. So far against Boston, he's got an assist tonight, still no shot. So, I'm not sure if you were even sort of holding him as a deep spot on your lineup and are like, oh, now he's playing with Barkov and Rodriguez. I still don't know, Shams, that it depends how deep your roster is, of course, but I'm confident he wouldn't, if I'm trying to place him amongst my guy, the guys on my roster right now, like Lehkonen and Byfield and Sharon Govich, who I've already dropped, but where he fits amongst those guys is still pretty decisively at the bottom. So for me, this is still not exciting enough to get behind Tarasenko, but also it doesn't rule out, it doesn't mean that he's not going to go off in a single game like he did in his second game as a Panther, but he's been real quiet since then.
Oh yeah, I'm with you for 100% on unless you're in a special league where you could fit him in and it's a very deep league, I wouldn't be moving to add him this week. It's more of if you say had other people or had injuries and you haven't actually gotten around to dropping him yet, he might be a little bit more interesting as that last person that you're starting in a utility slot or the last forward. He goes from an obvious drop to hey, compare against your other players. So it's not a big upgrade, but it's a upgrade nonetheless.
Fair enough.
And talking about schedule is that going with all of these plays of trying to find out anyone that was going to be having an off night game, we moved to Vancouver, where where players are not going to be doing much, people probably jumped on Elias Lindholm thinking, okay, hey, you might not be doing much, but I get 2 off-night games, and that's going to be enough for me. Well, he is considered day-to-day, and I got to ask you a question. I'm going to read you a quote, and I want you to tell me, does this feel day-to-day to you? This is the coach talking yesterday about the Lindholm scratch. Somewhat maintenance, and we've got to take a look at some of the stuff and evaluate every day. I don't know at this point about it, shutting him down, to be honest. It's about a feel of where we see how it shapes day to day. He says day to day, but hinting to that shutting it down, I'm not really sure of maybe the way I look at it is that basically you're going to be able to stash them on your IR, so you're going to be safe there. But other than that, I might be just thinking at the back of my mind of not banking that he's going to be playing.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I actually thought you were going in the direction that, like, are they lying to, like, save cap somehow or something about his status? But it is weird. And I, like, you know what? It's a little, it muddies the waters here because now we can, like, wonder, oh, like, why hasn't Lindholm been good in Vancouver? Like, does it have anything to do with some kind of nagging injury? I'm just looking at Lindholm's game log. And so he had points in 2 straight, a goal and an assist leading into the games now that Lindholm is out. But like, oh my gosh, like we've talked about this enough. Like, it seemed like such a savvy, smart acquisition, and it just really hasn't panned out, which is like, I feel sorry for Vancouver would have made like a much worse choice in the past. But Lindholm has just 18 shots in his last 16 games, and 5 of those came in a single game against Boston a month ago. So really, he's got 13 shots over 15 games. It's a lot. Like, he's had 2 shots 3 times in that span. The rest are 1s and 0s. Shot column looks like binary code. It's not a good look for Elias Lindholm. So, hey, go ahead, like, take a vacation, get right, come back, and maybe have an impact in the playoffs. Elias Lindholm, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's made me, for our fantasy heads here, not of an interest, but he does have that kind of, I don't know if he ever got close to the Selke, but I always hear people talking about him kind of being the defensive centerman. So could be an idea with you. Is that like keeping him kind of rested? And then, if I believe is that they could probably lose it literally every game for the rest of the season, be in the playoffs. So it's like, or playing for positioning, and hell, even if they get the top slot, they could be matched up with someone like Nashville. So it's not like they're really in a much of a rush to get a certain spot. So maybe they'll just play it safe to make sure that he's fully healthy for that playoff spot.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I can tell you, like, his defensive, like, raw numbers look fine, but relative to the team, he's not pulling his weight. Like, he's not doing as well as just about everybody else. So that's not. What more can we say aside from, like, I really hope this isn't the return of Carolina Lindholm, and that the only place he could thrive was not Calgary. I really, really hope.
Yeah, well, the good thing is at least they didn't pull a Calgary and then sign him to like an 8-year deal like we have with Huberdeau. So he's going to be off in free agency, and then we'll have to do that old dance of players that did well and not so well, and now with a new team, where the hell do you pick him? It will be a very interesting sight to see, even if he doesn't stay with the team where he ends up next.
Yeah, maybe like 1 year, $6 million or something. 5.5.
Yeah.
5. 4.5. It's dropping every day. Step up. All right. Who's next, Shams?
So talking about having the luxury of resting players and maybe not going for it, this team doesn't have that opportunity. And honestly, even if they do win every game, I'm not sure how much their playoff odds are. I'm talking about Buffalo, and Jack Quinn kind of just, I haven't really heard much about him. And then he's practicing now, and he's officially, the coach said, day to day. And the interesting thing is that he wasn't just practicing. He was doing line rushes, and he was paired with Cousins and Peterka, which left now an interesting setup is that we always see it's kind of Skinner fall to the third line, which is not much of a worry with Krebs and Benson. He can kind of get his points where he is. But the nice beneficiary here is that Greenway is now with Thompson and Tuck, assuming that this sticks all together, is that people that kind of picked up Greenway's like, I guess I'll get 2 games and maybe he'll get some hits and a random assist, is that this could be an interesting thing to have kind of a upgrade your Peterka and Cousins. Like, I guess Peterka depends on how you feel about probably a slight downgrade because he's not on the top line, but being with Cousins and Quinn, 2 players of interest. Greenway gets an upgrade, and then you have Krebs and Benson, which are interesting players because I would assume that Skinner's already owned.
Yeah, I think that's fair, all of that. And I'm trying to think of of how interested I am in Jack Quinn. I mean, honestly, as a Wednesday, Friday player, I'm interested. And he was like doing really well before he got injured. He had 6 points in like 5 3/4 of a game because he got injured and then had to leave the game, obviously. But he was shooting. I'm seeing he had a 55% share of power play time. It was against San Jose in the last game before Quinn got injured. And I'm just trying to load the lines while I talk to see if that was just an aberration. Yeah, okay. The second unit and the top unit were had exactly the same amount, and I'm going to assume Quinn was not on the top unit, is what I'm trying to get at. But it's not that he hadn't spent time on the top unit at other points, although I think there were other injuries at play that led to that. Listen, there's worse you could do, right? You're adding 2 games if he plays both. From a guy who has 12 points in 17 games this season. That's a 60-point pace almost. And honestly, I would. Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to say that I would drop Tarasenko for Jack Quinn because there really aren't a lot of options to make moves and add GP.
I'm definitely with you on that. It's like, for example, you talking about it on the Sunday show, is that I used my last move last week to get 2 games of Keegan Colasar, of all people. So if I'm going for 2 games of him, I am interested in a potential. Now we'll have to wait and see. Is that technically still day to day, so it's not guaranteed. So you'll have to pay attention to the news tomorrow. But if Jack Quinn is playing and you got 2 games, even if he was on the third line with like nobodies, like say if it was like Gershenson's, Krebs, and him, I would still be more interested in him than most of the people that you have options for, just because you're getting 2 games.
All right. Yeah, I think that's all very reasonable. Okay. And then how many more injuries and outjuries do we have here?
Got 2 more just to kind of go with. Is that the good news I'll start with is that we got Jeremy Lauzon is back, is kind of went from that, hey, I believe he was week to week, but he could play if it was a playoff game. Well, I guess they wanted to get the games out of him. He is back today. It's going to be an interesting thing to see. Is that obviously you're listening to the show now. I'm not sure if you had a position to activate him or pick him up on some waiver wires I see in certain teams, at least in like a couple division. He's a free agent, so he might be out there. Is that it's going to be an interesting thing to see. Is that I'm kind of worried is that maybe this game he might not do much. He is a hit kind of person, so maybe he'll like have a slow game. But depending on your league, say in my home league, he was doing so much for me as a hits and blocks guy because it's a categories league. Even with 2 games, he does so much. You might want to be tempted to pick him up just because, yeah, it's 2 games. It may not even a game bonus, but like just have a random defenseman. It still might be like +5 hits and like +3 blocks, even without a game advantage.
Yeah. For a hits target, Jeremy Lauzon is a great option. And it's good to. I'm seeing he's back tonight. I'm just seeing what he's done so far. 2 hits and a block. He's easing back into things. He's only played 6 minutes, and we'll see if Lauzon picks up the pace. Because like before the injury, the hit counts were 5, 7, 9, 3, 5, 6, 4, and he had like 2 or 3 shots a night. Tack on a block. Shams, I know you love these like floor defensemen. So Lauzon is right up your alley. And in a Cats League especially, there's value to be found from Jeremy Lauzon returning from injury.
For sure. And then the last injury to talk about, it may be not really an injury, but more just a precaution, is that everyone was happy to get Seguin back in their lineups. I know I was. And now he is officially out today with a rest day. So it's kind of a surprising thing, especially with it not being a back-to-back. So sure, it's a busy day. Maybe at least in the league that I had him in, I was able to start someone else so I didn't lose a game. But it is just something to keep in mind, is that I would assume he gets to get the next game, but maybe that Saturday, which will be an interesting thing to see, is because it's probably a busy day for you already. It's going to be something to just kind of keep an eye out. It's kind of maybe the Hintz situation from years ago, where kind of have to just wait for the start of each game to see who's playing and who's not. But at least with this busy week, it might not be as a sting as it would be any other.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like maybe a relief that Seguin is I would actually be rooting for him to spend as much time in an IR plus spot as possible because I can't use him this week. Actually, you could barely, well, depending on your lineup, you may or may not be able to use him next week. So this is a nice little reprieve for Seguin managers.
And with that, we'll jump to our ad break. See you soon. Welcome back. To help avoid us, we've kind of been on the ice for a little too long. To avoid this being an extra long shift, we're going to go through a lightning round of hot and cold streaks. We kind of hinted to the first player. We got Pavel Mintyukov. He has 3 points in the last 4 games, a goal and assist, or a goal and 2 assists. And the interesting thing that really got me was that he has almost 3 shots a game the last few games, because that's the part that really gets me is that, we kind of hinted that the Ducks weren't going to get many goals, but if he gets those shots and then sprinkle on random hits and blocks, it'll be interesting. And the nice thing is that depending on when you pick him up, if you have him today, you're going to get 4 games out of him. So what I did is I actually dropped Matt Roy, who is a good defenseman, not a top tier, to get 2 extra games because he was only going to play Thursday, Saturday. Now we got 4 games out of Mintyukov. So even if he doesn't point that much, I'm going to get some value.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully he's on a better power play. I wish the game was already on, honestly. Like it starts in an hour still so we could see. All right, let's move to Ottawa, where Mathieu Joseph is on a 3-game point streak with a goal and 3 assists, only 2 shots over that span, 0 power play time to speak of, and playing on the third, I think it's the third line in Ottawa. It's got to be the third line. With Dominik Kubalik and Ridley Gregg. And so with Ottawa playing on Wednesday, that's just a little moment, right? Where maybe you can add a game played. Mathieu Joseph is hot. I mean, in the last game, Angus Crookshank was playing on the second line two top line 1A or 1B with Claude Giroux and Tim Stützle. Crookshank has 5 shots in 2 games and has scored on one of them. And so I actually wonder, Shams, if we're looking at Mathieu Joseph, if I wouldn't rather actually take Angus Crookshank for a spin, who has been one of the top scorers for the Sens AHL affiliate in Belleville. Last season, he had 47 points in 71 games. This season, 46 points in 50 games to, yes, I'm just confirming, lead the team in scoring. If you're not sure who he is, 24 years old, 5th round pick, college grad out of the University of New Hampshire. And I guess the Sens are interested to see. He's undersized, he's a smaller guy. And I am curious to see how he fares. So I actually, while we're going to mention that Mathieu Joseph is on a hot streak, I'm also going to say that even with that hot streak, I'm going to get real hot about this. And especially if there's line combos from the morning, I might, and Angus Crookshank stays in the top 6. I am interested in Crookshank. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, with that, I would with you because basically when I put this on here, I was going to be kind of saying of just how desperate do you want to be? So it's going to be that game of do you want to have the production that has happened in the past, go with that, or go with the person that has the best potential? And then I'm kind of with you is that if you're in that position to take a 1-game shot, I'd probably be more interested in Crookshank, assuming that he stays there, because even with the third line, there's no Tarasenko floating around to be on the wing, and also 0 power play. It's going to be that situation of you're just rolling the dice and hoping the best if you're taking Mathieu Joseph.
I'm just going to sneak in. I'm trying to we're trying to, I actually said off mic, let's hurry up. But I want to just thank Dominik Kubalik for the season he's having, and never for even one moment making us wonder, is he someone we should add? Gosh, he's on a 19-point pace this season. He's got 15 points in 66 games, minus 26, career low 12.5 minutes a night. Clearly, this isn't a fit, and clearly he wasn't the key piece coming back from Detroit in the DeBrincat deal. But yeah. But I express my appreciation because he's been a guy who's come up so often on the show. He goes on these little runs and then he disappears, and he saved us that this year. So shout out Dominik Kubalik.
So talking about little runs that might not be little runs is that Brandon Saad has 5 points in his last 3 games, and that's 3 goals and 2 assists. So some nice meaty points there. And the interesting thing is that it may not be exactly to 1-to-1, but it does line up to him getting the second wide. And the nice thing is with the second wide, it's kind of shuffled around, but they broke it up the Robert Thomas, Kyrou, Bishnevich line. And it has been a mixture of 1 or 2 of them have been on the second wide. So Brandon Saad has been playing sometimes with both Bishnevich and Kyrou, which are obviously really interesting players to be playing with. So that kind of situation is that maybe it's probably in the situation where, depending on how deep your league is or where your roster spots are, you're probably not going to be fitting in for the rest of this week. But if I remember correctly, they do play 4 games next week. And with the way the schedule goes, you might be able to get some more information there. And one last thing to keep in mind is that, yes, he's not playing on the top power play, but all of these 5 points, even strength. So it's got to be that kind of thing to keep in your pocket. Probably don't have him on your team right now, and you're probably not picking him up unless you're in a dire strait with an injury, but it's something to keep in mind for championship week.
Yeah, I think the Monday game for St. Louis next week, like it was this week, is what makes Brandon Saad worth consideration. The rest of the St. Louis schedule next week, you mentioned, Shams, they have 4 games, but it's Monday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, which isn't awesome, right? So keep an eye, like maybe a watch list as a late ad. Saad has 5 points in his last 3 games, 7 shots, 3 goals, 2 assists. So you can make of all those numbers what you will. All right, let's take a look at Nazem Kadri over in Calgary. We're going to shift from hot to cold. Cold Kadri. Yikes. Listen, Kadri's had like a pretty nice season, okay? And I actually feel like I just oversold it. I actually did a bad take where I was really going to be like, I did it wrong, and I'm still doing it wrong, but I'm not redoing it. Kadri is cold at the moment. That's all there is to it. He's still shooting. He's got 11 shots in his last 3 games. No points to show for it. Shams has shared with me that Calgary, the game is, they're not very far into the game. What is it? It's the end of the first, and they're getting outshot 14-6 by Chicago, and they're getting outscored 2-0. Kadri for this game looks like he's on a line with Pospisil and Zari, which is, I think, where he's been really for a lot of the time. And his line hasn't been on. I'm trying to see for any of the goals against. It doesn't look like it's showing up very well, actually, on Frozen Tools. One of them was on the power play. Anyway, Kadri's cold, but what you going to do? I would, honestly, Shams, like in full lineups, I would keep playing Kadri. I wouldn't shy away from putting him in my lineup, like throwing him back in on Thursday. He's on a 68-point pace this season. Like I said, the shots are still coming, so it's bad timing. But I'm gonna keep the faith in Nazem Kadri.
Interesting, yeah, because that's kind of the thing, is that he has the pedigree. My kind of the worry with is that it's not really Kadri. It's kind of the way of like look at kind of how we look at the Penguins. It's like, for example, is that the last 3 games, I'm not including this Chicago game, is that Calgary has scored a total of 5 goals over 3 games. So not even 2 goals a game. So it's going to be that situation of just where are these points coming from? If they're not going to score anyway, it's kind of hard for Kadri to get involved. And if this game's any indication, I actually had in my notes, it's like, don't be surprised if Calgary goes off on Chicago, but like they do have some more playoff ready teams coming up, of like the Blues, where sure they might not be the greatest, but it's easy for Binnington or Hofer to go on a goalie kind of brick wall situation. And then you got the next game coming up after that is Vegas, which is going to be a tough fight for anyone. So that's kind of my worry, is more of just the kind of the team. Because like, for example, I dropped Sharangovich. I think you did too, that he's probably was more on a point streak than Kadri is the last few games. So if we're willing to drop Sharangovich, you might be willing to drop Kadri. And this is more of just kind of a concern of the team, not really a concern of the player, especially with how much time's left in our fantasy season.
Yeah, good point. So we'll see if Calgary can find their game. I mean, Markstrom is starting tonight, right? Trying to return from injury. And Not going so well. All right, and let's wrap up the show with Tristan Jarry and Philip Grubauer with another couple goalies who are struggling. And Tristan Jarry, apparently had been playing well, but the team in front of him hadn't. The Penguins have won only one of their last 5 games, and Nedeljkovic was in net for it. And I not to say that's a blight on Jarry, but he hasn't been winning. His save percentage hasn't been good. His last win came on March 14th, which is almost 2 weeks ago. And there's just honestly, Pittsburgh's in a sad spot, man. They are not looking good. And so, I'm in a wins-only league. I carried Jarry for too long. I've let go. And I think you can too, because at this point, save percentage and wins, I don't think either one is going to come. And then Philip Grubauer is Philip Grubauer again. He had a rough night against Montreal. He made 2 saves and gave up 4 goals before he gave up 4 goals on 6 shots. In other words, before being pulled against Montreal on Sunday. I think Decord is getting the start against Anaheim tonight. I could still see him getting every other game, because Seattle seems to enjoy, or every third game. I don't think he's going to get straight up benched, but I guess you just have to wonder again whether he's going to give you much, because I'm looking at Grubauer's last 5 starts, and only one of them has been quality, and that's after a really, really lovely run. And he's also won none of them. Oh, Seattle. Wow. I'm actually just noticing, they've lost 8 in a row. They're really fading. They looked... Anyway, Seattle one day is going to be the team that we all thought they could be. But that year is not this year. And Philip Grubauer, I don't know if he'll ever be the goalie that we thought he could be.
Yeah, it's basically the way I look at it is that, even if he does get a start, is that I'd probably... best for fantasy managers that Decord gets the rest of the starts just to protect ourselves from getting tempted by that Grubauer start. So really that's the way I'm looking at it, is that either of these guys are not going to be guaranteed starts coming up. And even if they get the starts, they may end up, there's a potential that they end up being horrendous. So I would just be looking elsewhere for goalie starts unless you have literally, it's the day of and you have no one to start, maybe, because they do have a little bit of pedigree. But other than that, just run away.
I gotta say, the one nice thing with the packed schedule and the tandem, the evolution of sharing goalie starts, is that there's always goalies available, always. So there's not a whole lot of pressure to hold any one guy, because tonight in my Cupful League, I already had my 2 goalie starts set, but there were 5 other guys who I could have grabbed out of free agency. So yeah, exactly. In this circumstance, you can run from guys like Grubauer and Jarry. There's no need for long-term commitment. And Shams, I think that brings us to the end of the show. That's a long shift. I'm sorry.
We didn't have much time together on shows before. This might be our first, if maybe the accountabilities could confirm that. But either way, is that yeah. This is the end of the show. Thank you for joining us. You can follow us at Short Shifts KK, and you can follow the Mega Show at keepingkarlsson.com. As we mentioned before, a lot of the news is in the air, so make sure to follow GameDayTweets.com to get all of your info without having to dig through Twitter. You can get it right from the source. And thank you to Pat Roach for our outro music and intro music. And one last thing to let you all know is be better than us. Make sure to play smart and keep your shifts much shorter.